Right. Hello, everyone. As the attendees all trickle into the webinar room, welcome. Give it another minute as some more attendees show up. All right. Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us today. My name is Sean Burns, and today I have the pleasure of hosting Kevin Lobdell, who is going to present today about college-based alumni engagement to our Engineering Development Forum community. Every fall and spring, we host a webinar for our community of practice to engage with all of you kind of throughout the academic year to bring subject matter experts and great content for free to our engineering fundraising peers. Today, I serve as Vice President of the Engineering Development Forum, our nonprofit group that helps bring this wonderful community together who fundraises for engineering, computer science, STEM-based fields in higher education. And then on the day-to-day, I work at New York University and I raise money for our Tandon School of Engineering today. Kevin's going to talk to us from the University of Colorado's Boulder College of Engineering and Applied Science, where he's going to represent what he shared in June at our conference at Duke University around college-based alumni engagement, how to get started. So without further ado, Kevin, please take it away. Welcome and thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. First, I'd just like to say thank you to all of our attendees for joining us today. There's a few names that are familiar to me, so thanks for joining us. I'm really excited to share this topic again. As we were thinking about the preparing for the last EDF conference at Duke, I was excited to kind of share a little bit about what was happening at CU Boulder in the engagement space and sort of how that weaves into advancement as a whole. And then I was very honored to be asked again to present as part of the fall webinar. So I will keep things moving, and then certainly there'll be time at the end for questions. So feel free to put those in the Q&A function here. So high level, I'll give a little bit of background on who I am to have a bit of an understanding of kind of how I come to this work. The beginning assumptions that I had when I started building a team from the ground up at CU Boulder, how I got started overall, as we built momentum, what that looked like, how that fits into the bigger picture of what we're doing across campus. Certainly, I don't think you can talk much in the engagement space these days without talking about the case engagement metrics as well. So I'll talk about what we're doing in that space, and then how all of this is informing and is part of the larger campus-wide alumni engagement strategy. And as I mentioned, then we'll open it up for questions. So first, a little bit of background on me. I'm originally from upstate New York. I went to Clarkson University for my undergraduate degree at Clarkson. That's really where I sort of fell in love with higher education and realized that working in higher education was an option. And then I decided to get a master's in that space. So that took me to the University of Connecticut, where I originally focused in my career, got started in the student affairs space before eventually transitioning over to advancement and specifically alumni engagement. And then since I've been out in Colorado, I was able to complete an educational doctorate through our Denver's campus in the degree is called Leadership for Educational Equity in Higher Education. So you can sort of see the different roles that I've had throughout my career. I've really highlighted the ones that have been, or the ones that are bolded are my time at CU Boulder. So I was originally hired at CU Boulder to build an alumni engagement office in our College of Engineering and Applied Science. And then as I've been here nearly 7 years now, I've taken on different roles and responsibilities during that time and am very involved in lots of aspects of our advancement work, overseeing donor relations, a number of our major gift officers, and just really plugged in a lot of different ways. And then you can see my previous experience in student affairs early on. And so kind of digging a little bit deeper in the alumni engagement space related to my career, I was very involved in my alma mater as a volunteer. And then when I was working there professionally as in the student affairs space, I was working for our honors program and an early college program. And so as I sort of wanted to add more aspects to my role, I began building out kind of entry-level alumni engagement programs for each of those, the programs that I was working for. And then those experiences combined together sort of got me interested in thinking about alumni engagement professionally and making the shift from student affairs. So my first big jump in that was transitioning to Binghamton University, which is one of the State University of New York campuses. And I transitioned there into their central alumni office at a time when they were launching their first ever plan for alumni engagement across campus, collaborating with all of our campus partners, the Alumni Association and the Alumni Association board's leadership. And that really was a phenomenal experience for my professional development and gave me an understanding of what that sort of coordinated approach across a campus could look like. And that's the mentality that I brought when I was ultimately hired and came out here about 7 years ago to the University of Colorado Boulder. As I mentioned, I was hired to build an alumni engagement office within engineering from the ground up. I'll go into much more detail about what that looked like shortly. But that's just sort of a little bit of background on my career. And then just to give some high-level overviews of the University of Colorado Boulder, I'm sure some of you have heard a bit about us in the football space over the last couple of years, perhaps. But we are one of four campuses as part of the University of Colorado system. We have an advancement team on the Boulder campus of about 190 employees, and then we sort of roll up to a system advancement office that supports us in various ways, as well as a centralized foundation that supports all of the four campuses from the philanthropic aspect. We're approaching 40,000 students, roughly 32,000 undergrads, 6,500 graduate students. In the athletic space, we recently transitioned from the Pac-12 to the Big 12, and we have 9 colleges and schools, the College of Engineering and Applied Science being one of them. Our college is about nearly 24% of the overall student population. We've had pretty significant growth in engineering over the last 10 years or so. And then we have an alumni population of roughly 50,000 out of the 300,000 plus for the campus. So switching gears a little bit and kind of starting to dig into how we got started in engineering. So as I mentioned, I was hired to build an alumni office from the ground up. When I came into that role, there were some assumptions that I had made or that had been made for me that sort of framed what was in place and how we were going to move forward in sort of building that program. So I like to start and share these because I think it's important to understand kind of where we got started and then how we built on it from there. So I think the first one that was really important was there was leadership buy-in for wanting to do this in the college. Our dean at the time was very receptive to the advancement team's leadership, putting forth a proposal saying, we want to build an alumni engagement office. These are the reasons why. This is why we think it's important. Because early on and still to this day, the alumni engagement function in engineering from a financial standpoint is predominantly supported by the college, whereas the rest of our advancement team financially is supported through our central advancement organization. So that leadership buy-in was critical. It got approval to hire my role as director of alumni engagement, some other positions, as well as operational budget. And then we knew that we wanted to build this sustainably. And this sort of relates to the last bullet of alumni engagement, and the way we are approaching it is very much a marathon, not a sprint. And so we want to put pieces in place, assuming those pieces work well, we will build on those and grow over time in a very sustainable way. Very much embrace the advancement mindset. This was from my experience previously at Binghamton. I didn't want alumni engagement to operate in a vacuum. I very much see alumni engagement, development, donor relations, marketing, and communications. We are an ecosystem that all must work together in order for us to accomplish our big picture goals. We can do lots of that work separately, but with our powers combined, it's much stronger. And then coming from a central alumni office, I was very much wanted to work collaboratively across campus. I wanted to understand what those intersections would look like and how we could work and support one another. And then again, it's a marathon, not a sprint. We certainly have little sprints along the way, but we need to build things sustainably because the worst thing that we can do is come up with all these ideas, promise alumni we're going to do all these things, and then not be able to deliver them because we don't have the capacity for whatever reason. So as we got started, I'll kind of talk through the first year and a half, what that looked like, and then sort of how we've been building since then. So when I got started, I had very few directives, which looking back, I was very grateful for. It was, we hired you, you have expertise in alumni engagement, you'll come in, get an understanding of where we're at, and then chart a path forward. So our dean definitely wanted us to focus on doing something or having activity in our top markets, coinciding with where our largest alumni populations, as well as our major gift prospects might live. We had a lot ongoing alumni awards program, which many folks did. So that was something that we were going to continue as a longstanding tradition of the college. And then previously, they had established a Graduates of the Last Decade board that had really high engagement, but there wasn't staff support or people that in the college could work with that board to get things off the ground. So they had lots of ideas and excitement, and that sort of fizzled and went away because there wasn't staff support for that. So we wanted to bring that back. And then, like I said, otherwise, I basically had a blank slate to sort of figure out what I wanted to do and then chart our path forward. So I did what any new employee does and new leader does. I came in, I wanted to sort of understand baseline where we are at, not only within the college, but across campus. So I did a college-wide and advancement-wide listening tour and just really understanding and trying to put the pieces together. And then figuring out what I thought my staffing model should be, what our annual plan should be in the alumni engagement space, figure out what we were going to measure so then we can have baseline metrics to then be able to compare our progress over time. And then I started in January of 2018. In the summer of 2018, I worked with our college assessment team to do a college-based alumni survey to just, again, get a sense of the landscape, what alumni were interested in, how they'd been engaged in the past, how they might like to be engaged moving forward, in a series of other things that was really helpful in informing how we're going to move forward. So from a staffing standpoint, I mentioned my role was approved to be hired to sort of lead the effort. We had a legacy alumni engagement line that carried over. That was a vacancy that I was able to fill. And then we had approval for a second level program manager position. So I had initially one person focused on the events and sort of all the logistics around that. The program manager for alumni engagement was sort of really focused in volunteerism. So our Graduates of the Last Decade board was part of that role, and really just trying to figure out what was happening from a volunteer standpoint across the college and how can we partner with that in a way that we're sharing information and benefiting each other rather than micromanaging or trying to take over all that volunteerism. I very much operate from that. It's awesome that we had, these 3 full-time roles working on alumni engagement, but we want to collaborate and partner with anyone across campus, or in this context, anyone across the college that has an interest in alumni engagement, because even if they're able to devote 2% of their time to alumni engagement, as that scales up and spreads across the college, our reach from an alumni engagement standpoint becomes much greater than what the 3 of us can do alone. And then we added a part-time advancement assistant in January of 2020, unbeknownst to them. And then a pandemic was going to start. I'll spare all the details from that. But now we are very much operating as a team of 4 in the alumni engagement space. Roughly the same structure now. My role has slightly changed, but we have focus on events, focus on volunteerism, and then the broader strategy. So I referenced an annual plan a little slide or 2 ago. We've been operating this way ever since, of kind of mapping out at the beginning of our fiscal year. These are all the things that we want to accomplish. These are the things that we want to focus on. This is a collaborative process with everyone on the team sharing their feedback and insights on what that looks like. We can, as years have gone by, we reflect on what worked or didn't work in the previous year, things that we want to accomplish, who's going to own what aspects of the plan, and then we revisit the plan periodically throughout the year to see what our progress is. So that inaugural plan back for fiscal year 19 was hiring and onboarding those 2 new staff members, really trying to create an awareness throughout the college that we existed, what we were trying to accomplish, how we can partner and collaborate with others. We wanted to launch a few regional networks, figure out what our signature events were going to be in addition to our annual awards event, figure out to what extent we wanted to have a presence in the student experience, our volunteer engagement, and then none of these things would happen without communications. So figuring out what that cadence was going to look like, what our team would own versus what our college marketing and communications team would own. So now I'll start to talk about sort of our initial outcomes as we were beginning to build momentum in that first year and rolling out some of those plans. So we established 5 regional networks in the first year. We have been very intentional about rolling these networks out in partnership with our development officers. Our development team is deployed regionally across the country. So if we're going to the Bay Area and we're going to do an alumni event in the Bay Area, we're going to have conversations with the development officer who covers that area to determine, who from the college might we want to come out and speak at an event that could also be utilized in individual major gift conversations that could help move those forward. So we can capitalize on whoever is traveling beyond our team to make the best use of their time. And so, to the extent that we can have all those stars align, we try to be very intentional about that. I referenced the volunteerism model before. There was certainly alumni volunteering across the college before our team existed. There are more boards and advisory boards across the college than I would care to admit. And those are all managed at the department or program level. And so we want to not take all those boards over because we don't have the capacity to do that, but we want to partner with them and know who's volunteering and be able to support that, track that, and then we can begin to really understand all the different ways each of these volunteers are engaging with the college. We developed an internal communication with our group called Alumni Engagement Partners. So these are faculty and staff throughout the college that have some level of interest in the alumni engagement space. So that's a way for us to communicate with them of what we're doing, helping to create awareness. We can promote their efforts and initiatives as well. And just, kind of subtly trying to keep on everyone's radar that there's all these alumni engagement things happening. And then that way they can help spread the word as well. We focus our signature event strategy. So we have the awards program. We do an annual CU Engineering Homecoming Tailgate. We developed a sort of a high-level speaker series that ties into a donor event called Leading with Impact. And so those are kind of the high-level things that we've been doing on an annual basis. And then a common theme you'll see throughout all of this is we want to collect and track as much data about all of these things as possible so we can see what that progression looks like over time and we can begin to make better informed decisions based on what is or isn't working. As far as our regional networks go, I mentioned, this is a sample of 3 of the areas that we're in. I think we're up to 7 networks at the moment. Early on, we had anticipated doing 2 events per year in each network. Historically, we brought the dean, we brought senior faculty leaders for the college, or faculty just generally sharing their research that's interesting and unique, and that is more broadly relevant to the alumni audience. We've scaled that down as we've added more networks. Going twice to every single one of them, especially in the post-pandemic landscape, wasn't making sense. So now we've sort of roughly mapped out the time frame of each year of when we're going to go to each of these areas. So we've gone from twice per year to 1 per year at the moment. We didn't want to reinvent or carry over the chapter model that many alumni associations use, including our own. So we've leaned into this concept of regional networks. And so therefore, we wouldn't want necessarily chapter leaders coming up with programming that would be specific to engineering. But we wanted to have a way for regional alumni to volunteer and support us. So we developed this role called Regional Network Ambassadors. And so these are alumni that live in these regions, and we've since expanded to areas that we're not going to for events. We have a map on our website. So alumni, students, anyone who's interested can see who these individuals are. And then they can reach out to them as a way to expand their network. Not necessarily from I would like to move to the Bay Area, this person's going to help me get a job, but this is a fellow buff who lives in the Bay Area that could help me, expand my network, allow me to land in that area and make decisions on what that's going to look like for me. And then we collaborate with them on the events that we're doing, of kind of bouncing ideas off of them of who we might bring for a speaker, locations we might use, or things like that. And as I mentioned earlier, we do collaborate with our development officers for each one of these regional events, so we can try to make it a win-win for everyone. And then on the volunteerism side, I've alluded to this a number of times, but really trying to coordinate the tracking of all the things that were happening throughout the college in a way that's, we don't want to steal your volunteers or take your information. It's from a true relationship management standpoint. The more information we can understand and know about how these individuals are engaging with us, and that we're tracking in a consistent way in the same place, the better we can the better we can be of supporting that individual volunteer's sort of engagement journey with us. And then it's really important for me to also focus on the stewardship of these volunteers. So we want each of the units and the areas that they're working with to thank them and show appreciation and show the impact. And we also do an annual thank you card from our dean. This is a kind of a poor screen or a photo of one of those examples, but they're not your standard, typical card. They're trying to be unique. There's generally a buffalo theme to them. And we just want our volunteers to know, regardless of whether or not you're volunteering in a very specific way in our mechanical engineering department, that is also having the impact on the college at large. And our dean, is recognizing that volunteerism and the impact of that. And then the last thing in this section is for the last 6 years, we've been compiling an annual report for all the things that we're doing in engineering. And you can see in the sub-bullets here of all the different things that we're tracking. So we can see year over year what the general demographics look like of the college, how our regional network engagement is performing and what that looks like, volunteerism, our communications. And so if anyone's interested, I'm happy to email sort of a template of what that looks like. It's just so you have an example if you are interested in doing something similar. We track a ton of things. We utilize our student workers a lot to make that a reality, but that's been really helpful for us to be able to show and see what trends have been specifically within engineering. And so that's a nice transition to kind of talking more broadly about campus-wide alignment. As I mentioned earlier, having come from a central alumni office, then being unit-based, I very much wanted that alignment, and it was really important for me to not operate completely in a silo within engineering. And that very much, as I'll talk about over the next couple of slides, has been an evolution. And so when I arrived back in 2018, our advancement division had our advancement strategic plan. There was a goal specifically focused on increasing campus engagement, but there were a lot of sub goals under that, but there weren't clear ways to measure the goals. And so it was this sort of thing that we were wrestling with, trying to figure out what engagement actually looked like as part of that strategic plan. And then, as we all know, shortly after that, the CASE Global Alumni Engagement Metrics model came out with our 4 categories of engagement: communication, experiential, philanthropy, and volunteerism. I'll talk in great detail about what that looks like with us shortly. And then we're currently in our 3-year strategic plan from fiscal year 24 to 26. We refer to it as a strategic framework. And then the second theme of that strategic plan is focusing on meaningful impact and engagement that advances the mission of CU Boulder. And I'll talk a little bit more about kind of what that looks like shortly as well. So as I mentioned, we've gone through a number of iterations. When I arrived, there was a campus-wide leadership group in alumni relations called the CARE Group, Council for Alumni Relations Experts. And that group was really trying to figure out, for that previous strategic plan, what does engagement look like in there? What are our goals? What do we care about measuring? And how are we actually going to do it? And then we've had various iterations of sort of a larger collective group of anyone who works in the engagement space. We want to bring them together regularly so we can learn from one another, build those connections that are professionally meaningful. And so our current iteration of that group is called the Alumni Engagement Roundtable. So those are professionals across our advancement division working in alumni engagement that come together. And then currently, I co-chair our Strategic Engagement Advancement Leaders Group, SEAL team for short, because we all wanted another acronym in our lives. And that group is really focused on developing a campus-wide alumni engagement strategy that will inform how we move forward. And if that didn't sound messy enough, I put together this chart that shows kind of over the last 7 or 8 years what this has all looked like. So we had the advancement strategic plan. Now we have the strategic framework. We had the CARE group. Now we have the SEAL team. All along, we've had the constant of various iterations of that collective group. We had the introduction of the CASE Global Alumni Engagement Metrics, which has been a huge catalyst for a lot of the work that we're doing. And like many of you, I'm sure you're either preparing for, in, or wrapping up a campaign. We are in the very, well, we're not in the early preparation stages, but we're very close to really being in our first ever campus-based campaign at Boulder. And so this strategic framework that we're in is very much was put in place to prepare us to make sure that we were campaign ready. We wanted to make sure that that engagement was a key component of that strategy, as well as the campaign. So the SEAL team, as I mentioned, was started a little over a year ago to support the new strategic framework. We're developing a campus-wide alumni engagement strategy, and then we have specific engagement goals that roll up as part of the strategic framework. Our SEAL team, I co-lead that group with one of my colleagues in the Alumni Association, and then we have different individuals across the division from various units there. In parentheses is the unit that they're from. That's not super important to know which units, but just to have that reference point. And then for some of our units that are smaller in scale, may not have direct representation on the SEAL team, but we wanted to make sure that they had a connection. So all the units that are italicized, those are the groups, the entities that we are liaisons to. So every entity that has an interest in what's happening on the SEAL team has a direct connection to the team. And that was really important for us. And then all of these sort of work groups that are part of the strategic framework have leadership team project sponsors. So you can see at the bottom bullet, Ryan and Taylor are our project sponsors and our direct connection to the leadership team for everything that we're doing. And then the Alumni Engagement Roundtable, again, is that broader group. We've been doing the last year and a half or so, we've been doing half-day retreats with them, kind of in the December and June timeframe, to bring them together, to get their feedback on what we're doing with the evolving strategy, how they can play into that strategy, providing feedback. And so these are just sort of some kind of the guiding framework around what the roundtable is looking to accomplish. And the 4 words that are bolded throughout here are the 4 values of our advancement division. That's a relatively, or maybe 2 years into having these values. And we've tried to be really intentional about weaving the values into as many things as possible. So there's really nice alignment of, this is why we're doing, our all staffs, for example, are, maybe themed around 1 or 2 of those values. And then we talk about all the work that we're doing or the direction that we're headed, utilizing the values as a frame. So now I'll spend a couple minutes talking about the case engagement metrics and what that's looking like here. So again, many of you, I'm sure, are very familiar with this, but there's the 4 overarching categories of communications, experiential, philanthropy, and volunteerism. This slide shows sort of the sub-bullets of what we're tracking and what we care about within each one of those categories. And then I'll kind of talk through at a high level, and you'll see some examples of what that looks like from an operational, being operationalized within our division. So we have participated in the case Global Alumni Engagement Metrics Survey from year 1. The first year, we did not have a tracking system in place. So it was like, let's throw as much of the random data that would count together, hope it sticks, and we'll at least submit something. And then we were like, well, we need to do this in a more intentional and clean way. And so we need to put a process in place to do this in a consistent way across all of our schools, colleges, and units. And then we can use that to inform goals and become a lot more intentional about what we're doing. So fiscal year 22 was the first year that we developed a consistent tracking method for those 4 categories across our division. So each school, college, and unit was responsible for tracking their own data. Now, certainly philanthropy, we've been tracking in a very consistent way for many years because we all have to do that. The other categories were a lot messier. So fiscal year 22, it was each school, college, and unit had their own Google spreadsheet in a very high-tech way. They had a tab for each category, and then we compiled all of that from each school, college, and unit. And then we've been reporting out on this data ever since then in a quarterly way. Year 2, in fiscal year 23, we were able to establish school, college, and unit and division-wide goals based on the baseline data from fiscal year 22. Fiscal year 24 that we just wrapped up was our second year of goal setting, and we migrated to a new CRM at the beginning of that. So that has provided lots of benefits for us, but also challenges. And then now we're in our 3rd year of goal setting. We're continuing to transition, getting more and more of this data into our CRM. We're in Salesforce, previously in Advance. And so it's certainly been a journey. It's been very messy, but we've made tremendous progress during that period of time. So these charts are just for examples here, but you'll see that for this is our campus-wide results. This is from last fiscal year through Q3. You can see that we set our goals here at the category level, and then we set an overall goal for the division. So for last year, we were looking at a goal of 204,000 total instances of engagement across 90,000 unique constituents. So to explain that a little bit further, using communication as an example, we have 77,000 instances of communication that we're looking at. So every single time a constituent clicks on an email, for example, we would count that each individual time. So if someone one constituent clicked 5 times on an email, we would count them 5 times in the count total, and then count unique, we would only count them once. So we're deduping across categories, and then we're totaling it, and then we're deduping across all categories. And then you can see through Q3, we're looking to see what progress we had to date at that point for both count total and count unique. And then we're also interested to see the differences and the variation in how different forms of engagement relates to philanthropy. So we're looking at, in an individual fiscal year, the individuals that have engaged across these categories, what percentage of them have also made a gift at any level to CU Boulder. And so, you can see how that variation. So experiential, at least through Q3, had our highest percentage of those individuals being philanthropic, except for those in the philanthropy category, because those by nature are 100% philanthropic. So we can dig that one, or take that a layer deeper and look at this from a College of Engineering context. So it's the same exact model. We set our goals for count total and count unique across our 4 categories using our historical data. And then we can see, as we go quarterly throughout the year, how we're tracking toward our goals. And you can see the variation of where we were at per goal, and then what that translated to of those individuals being philanthropic. And then we'll take it one level deeper. Is we have other versions of these reports that then break each of the 4 categories into our subcategories to then understand, okay, we had 4,100 instances of engagement and communication. How did that break down across the different categories? So roughly 1,900 of them came from email clicks. We did a really big initiative to get updated contact information. And so that was a big bucket within communication as well. And then similarly with our experiential category, those that attended events and those that were contacted by someone on our team that was documented in a contact report, our philanthropy numbers, and then our various categories of volunteerism and what that looks like. And then again, we can begin to look at, all right, what forms of engagement are having a higher percentage of those constituents who are making a gift. And then, how do we flex based on that data? So, our development officers activity here is counted in-person contact. They're a good majority of the in-person contact that's made. They're nearly 50% of those individuals are philanthropic. That makes sense because they're meeting with current and potential donors. And so we would expect that to be higher. Our board member philanthropy was 27%. We would think, we would anticipate, that's a really deep volunteerism opportunity. Perhaps our boards are not structured in a way where there's a philanthropic expectation. Maybe there's an opportunity there. Maybe we should do something different. So again, this takes it one level deeper. And then the last chart I will show in this space is looking at, now that we've been doing this in a consistent way year over year, that is not to say that we haven't made adjustments, because we're learning and we're trying to tighten things up over time. But we can see what our historical engagement has been over a year. So fiscal year 22 was our inaugural year. So this is our baseline. We set our first goal in fiscal year 23. This is how we ended fiscal year 23. We set our fiscal year 24 goal. This is how we were at least through Q3. And then this is each school, college, and unit was able to get this kind of overview history of their engagement, as well as dig down and see all the subcategories to then inform and provide what their fiscal year 25 goal was going to be. We did this a few months ago. Then that would all roll up and we're able to set our campus-wide goal. So now I'm going to kind of go a little bit broader and talk about our campus-wide alumni engagement strategy that we've been developing with the SEAL team. And so this is sort of our infographic around our strategic framework. We've got our themes sprinkled around here. We've got our values across the bottom. And so our engagement goal, or our engagement theme rather, is here. We inspire meaningful impact and engagement that advances the mission of CU Boulder. So that's the theme in which our SEAL team is operating under. And then I'm not going to go into great detail about the strategy that we're developing, but these are the overall components that we're really focused on. So data, again, is a very common theme throughout all of this, building on what we're doing with the case engagement metrics, making sure that it's consistent, trying to get it all in the same CRM so everyone has access to the same data and can look in the same place. We've developed an advancement continuum, which I'll share in a second. Digital engagement is a huge area that we're looking to strengthen. We're bringing in a director of digital engagement very soon that will help us kind of build on all the ideas that we've developed through the strategy. And then thinking about all the operational shifts that we might want to make to, again, make it all more streamlined, to increase the impact of all the engagement work, both from an internal standpoint and then also not losing sight of the impact that our alumni and our external constituents are having, because we know that right now it feels very disjointed to a lot of them because, quite frankly, it is. So that's something that we want to focus on and improve. So the high-level goals that we are focused on as relates to the SEAL team, and then that theme too is part of our strategic framework. So we've got our ongoing process here of looking at just the general tracking of engagement and wanting to slightly grow that, but also know that more is not just, that's not the best approach or strategy. We're really interested in increasing both the breadth and the depth of the engagement of our constituents. So we have two goals as part of the strategic framework, our 2.1 and 2.2. So 2.1 is really looking at the work that we've been doing historically with our case engagement metrics tracking and saying, okay, last year we had around 90,000 unique constituents engage with us. Over the next couple of years, we want to aspirationally grow that to 100,000 unique constituents engaging with us. But we also want to maintain or grow the number of case categories that they're engaging with us. So last year, we had about 90,000 unique constituents engage with us. I think it was like 22.5% of them were engaged in more than one of the 4 categories. So we want to grow the number of uniques and then slightly grow the percentage of them that are involved in more than one category. And we're referring to that as our breadth goal. And so we can, I'm not doing it in this presentation, but we can then peel back the layers and say, all right, well, what is the one category that each of these individuals are participating in? And can we deploy strategies for all the individuals that are only engaged in experiential? And why might they not be showing up in the communications category? And things like that. So those are the conversations that we're having behind the scenes with the SEAL team to figure out our path forward. And then the second goal is to develop an advancement continuum, which I'll show on the next slide. And then use that as a pilot to think about subsets of our constituents and based on their historical engagement with us, how we might move them, how they might deepen their engagement with us. And so that this is referred to as our depth goal. And so I'm realizing now I haven't updated this slide since the summer presentation. We have since defined the percentage that we want to move in the target population for that. But more importantly, I'll show the continuum. I won't go through this in great detail, but basically thinking about the path that our constituents might have with us based on their historical engagement. Have to give credit to our friends at the Ohio State University. Some of you may have seen the continuum that they've developed with their Buckeye tree. We had a conversation with them early on, trying to wrap our heads around what a continuum might look like, and that their example provided a lot of inspiration for what we've ultimately come up with here. That is obviously very Colorado and Boulder centric, but is similar to what they've come up with. And so, we kind of start out here, out by a tent, kind of sleeping, being silent, not really aware of what's happening. And then, slowly through the different forms of engagement, which are mapped back to the case engagement metrics categories and all the things that we're tracking, thinking about how we can deepen engagement and then ultimately get them to this champion level where they're engaged with us in all 4 categories. I will point out, and we're very intentional to say that we know that not every constituent's journey is linear and they're going to go exactly from one category to the other, but it allows us to think about what depth of engagement could look like, and then be more intentional about, rather than emailing everyone the same thing all the time, it's like, how can we communicate with subsets of those individuals? And then this shows here, I won't go through this in great detail, but it shows the high level case engagement categories, what that looks like, and then kind of peeling back some layers, what actually is informing who is showing up in which level of the continuum. And then we're beginning to think about how we can deepen that engagement and move constituents through the continuum. And our pilot groups for this is really focused on, as I mentioned earlier, we're preparing for a campaign. And so, we have a couple tiers from our campaign consultants of our top prospects, and those are and will continue to be very heavily managed and engaged by our development officers. And then we have two other tiers of prospects, one that have decently high capacity but low historical engagement, and then lower capacity but higher historical engagement. We're working on those two tiers, and we're going to deploy some strategies based on how they're showing up in the continuum today, and seeing what might work to move them through the continuum. And then we can replicate the strategies that work for other larger groups of constituents that aren't currently the focus of the pilot. So in conclusion, these are kind of a couple sort of philosophical highlights that I like to kind of close with, and then we can transition to questions. One, I like to reinforce that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And so we want to be really intentional and sustainable about how we move things forward. I think, I think I'm a relatively type A person, and I like to have things very nice and cleanly organized and very systematic. But with all the things that I've referenced that we've done through here, both within engineering and all these larger campus initiatives, they've been messy and it hasn't been perfect, and we know that, but it's gotten more perfect each time we've done it. And so it's very much an evolution, and being comfortable with that level of ambiguity, knowing that you sort of have a larger goal in sight. That's just sort of a place that I feel like you kind of have to operate when you're doing these sorts of things. This next bullet is one of the things that I say a lot to internal partners, a little bit less to our external alumni, but for the right audience, it's relevant. And certainly my team has heard this from me a lot, is there's no shortage of ideas of what we can do in the alumni engagement space. There's a shortage of capacity to execute them well. And so we can't do everything. We can always have an ongoing list of things that we could do, but we need to be really intentional about choosing things and adding things that we have the capacity for, and we keep doing the things that are good, and the things that aren't working well or aren't having the success that we want, we can sort of sunset those. We want to make sure mapping our efforts to those overarching goals. That's why I really like, having that involvement at the campus level to be able to, as intentionally as possible, make sure engineering is not operating in a vacuum, but what we're doing is complementing and also supporting what we're doing at the campus level, which has also very much been an evolution. And then tracking the data consistently, that's been an evolution. I guess everything is, as I'm thinking about it now. And then ideally, we want to do this in the CRM. We want to have as much of the data in the same place, accessible to all of our team. And I think I may have gotten this also from Ohio State, but I love it too, is if it's not in the database, it didn't happen. Now, obviously, if there's not a place for it in the database, that's another issue that needs to be dealt with. But we aspire to get to a point where we have real-time data on all this engagement. We'll have dashboards, and we can slice and dice this data in a lot of different ways. So more of our team can utilize it to make informed decisions, regardless of where they sit in the organization and then the impact that they're trying to make through their role or their school, college, or unit. So with that, I'm happy to transition and answer any questions that you all may have.
Kevin, thank you. The first question we have here is from Victoria. She did ask, what type of CRM software do you currently use?
Yes, so we were in Lucian Advance, and then about a year and a half or so ago, we transitioned into Salesforce. And yeah.
And is Salesforce for the alumni relations, alumni engagement, or is it development, advanced? Everyone's on the same platform.
Yeah. So it's a system held platform. that all four colleges, all four of our campuses utilize the same Salesforce. Without getting off on too much of a tangent, one of the challenges from a data standpoint that we have is our ecom system, which we utilize Marketing Cloud to send our emails, is utilized through a different instance of Salesforce, also at the system level, but that prevents us from having our email data populate in our advancement Salesforce instance. And so, it's on the list, but we have many instances of Salesforce at University of Colorado.
Terrific. Well, anyone on the webinar, please type in your questions to the Q&A. Monica has a question that says, how did you go about identifying your internal alumni engagement partners?
Yeah, great question. So it looked a little different throughout the college. So having those initial conversations, there were some people doing a lot of work already. So our mechanical engineering department, for example, well before I showed up, they took it upon themselves to develop all this sort of career programming to be able to engage alumni in what they were doing with their mechanical engineering students. And so it was like, well, we just want to, support that. And as we're meeting alums that may be interested in participating in that, we want to be able to share that with you. And we want you to also share the data with us of who's engaging. So in some instances, things were already happening and it was a little bit easier to bridge that conversation. And then others, it was, it might be the chair of the department that has an interest in it and sees the value. It might be a program manager in the department or the person that supports their board. It's sort of the challenge is it looks a little different for every department. And as much as we want it to be consistent, the structure and staffing and the interest in alumni engagement varies across our departments and programs. But our career services team within the college, they've been awesome partners and very eager to work with us. And so I sort of almost see a lot of what we do internally very similar to like a development officer. Like you go out, you have a bunch of conversations. Someone might be like, yeah, this is awesome. I want to partner with you today. Like there's so much opportunity for us now. And others might be, yeah, I mean, I've thought about that, but like today's not the right day for me. And it might be 6 months or 2 years down the road before you have a really awesome collaborative relationship with a particular unit. So, you might need to have conversations with 50 people across the college for 20 of them to yield really successful partnerships where you can, work together in a mutually beneficial way.
Terrific. Building off Monica's question, Hannah asks, how did you gather volunteer data from the departments and programs? Was it challenging gathering that data from departments who don't have dedicated staff working in or for alumni engagement?
Yeah, great question. So it depends. It depends on who you're working with and the value and what they see in it. I will say for, the people that have built things on their own, there's a level of pride of what they've done. And there's a hesitation of what are you going to do with this data? Are you going to ask my volunteers for money? And so, it's an ongoing thing and having those conversations and understanding what the big picture is. And so, rather than framing it around like, we want to track this, we want to do this for our purposes, I try to reframe the conversation from thinking about best practices around relationship management. It is in all of our best interest to know how all of our alumni, our constituents more broadly, are engaging with us and be able to track that in a centralized way. So we know and we aren't stumbling over ourselves and we aren't having the alumni and constituents aren't having a negative experience being like, oh, well, I just was on campus 3 days ago volunteering with this department. Now, it would probably be unrealistic for us to know 3 days later that they were doing that. But point being, if you can frame it around like, we want to ensure that our constituents are having the best experience possible by having all this data in the same place with the people whose roles are externally facing, it's going to make all of us more successful at what we're doing. And ideally, our constituents have a better experience.
I know you referenced an annual report, and I don't know who you share that with, but do you share that with your internal stakeholders to kind of say, here's the entire alumni engagement snapshot for the school? And do you give them any drilled down data so they can see how they represent into it?
Yeah, we haven't in a while, and that's actually something that is a good thing to circle back on. Pre-pandemic, we would once or twice a year, we would bring together that alumni engagement partners group and say, celebrate all, the success that we were able to accomplish with all of our combined work, what that looked like and share some of those high level numbers. Post pandemic, we have not brought that group back together, and it's been a lot more sort of one-off individual conversations. But yeah, there certainly would be a lot of value in bringing that back.
Right. Brian asks, do you have any suggestions regarding pipeline building for alumni engagement, specifically young alumni?
Pipeline, I'm making an assumption from a development standpoint of donors. Yeah, I think that's one that we haven't figured out exactly. So we've gone through a number of iterations where much of our annual giving work at the University of Colorado was happening at the system level. We've on and off had one person on the engineering advancement team doing annual giving. Now we're about a year into the Boulder campus building out its own annual giving team and sort of figuring out how that fits into everything else that's happening. So, I think once they're they're up and running and sort of have their baseline work figured out, I think there's opportunity for our alumni engagement team to be more aligned from an annual giving standpoint of what that looks like, what our role, how we play into that. The one thing that I will say is that's been very successful and continues to gain momentum is our day of giving. So engineering, maybe 5 years ago, we jumped on the Giving Tuesday bandwagon. We did that for a couple of years completely on our own. It wasn't happening across the campus. And then we transitioned. I think we're going into our at least third year of a campaign called Buffs All In, which happens in March, and it's away from the noise around Giving Tuesday. And so engineering, I think we were one of the leaders with number of donors and that sort of thing last year. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there to get momentum behind crowdfunding in a way that it's like, sure, the more dollars, the better. But from a crowdfunding and Buffs All In campaign standpoint, we're looking to grow participation and momentum behind that. So I don't know if that really answered the question, but it's messy. We're doing some stuff in that space, but I think we as a campus and the way the college will fit into that, we're sort of charting a path forward that will be stronger in the future.
Terrific. Tara asks, does your team manage the regional networks, or do you leverage your ambassadors to schedule events, keep them running? They've considered doing the same, but it seems to be a huge time commitment from a logistics perspective.
Yeah, we very much have managed that on our own. The volunteers, the network ambassadors are really more informants and like, hey, we will say we are planning to come this time of, in March of next year. This is generally what we're looking to do. Are there venue suggestions? Do you have feedback on the speaker that we might bring? And then we leverage them to help get the word out for the event. We'll give them a shout out at the event itself. We have little ribbons that go on their name tags to identify them as a regional network ambassador. But I don't know, it's not necessarily a control. Well, I guess it is a control thing at the end of the day. From our overarching mission in engineering alumni engagement is we are focused on strengthening the CU engineering network. We want to provide opportunities for alumni to meet and connect with other alumni for meaningful personal and professional connections. We want alumni to be connected back to the college so they're informed advocates about where we're headed. They feel pride that that their degree is only getting more valuable. And then we want to get them plugged in from a volunteerism standpoint where they can share their skills and expertise for the college as a whole, for the benefit of the next generation of our students. So that's a sort of long-winded way of saying we wanted to be very intentional about what we're accomplishing at these events and not have it turn into like engineering. We're not interested in doing watch parties in our networks. There is a place for that, and that's driven by the Alumni Association. So I guess we wanted to be very intentional about what we're accomplishing in that. So we want their feedback, but we don't necessarily need or want them driving exactly what all that looks like.
Terrific. Hannah also asks, can you talk about the semi-annual retreats for alumni engagement staff? What does a typical agenda look like?
Oh yeah, that's great. So we'll start with lunch and sort of casual opportunity for people to get to know one another in the different units that they may not have seen or met or talked to in a while, especially we're hybrid now with the expectation of being on campus 2 days a week. So, there's just less opportunity for that. So we do that entirely in person. We communicate it months in advance so people can do their best to make it there. And then, it's generally around iterations of where we're at with the evolving strategy. And so, it might be, we're going to provide an update on what's happening with the strategy, or here is a draft of the continuum of where we're at from a philosophical standpoint. How does that land with you? What makes sense? What doesn't make sense? We've had, we try to have other folks present and showcase different projects or things that they're working on. We try to have it be not so much talking at, but an opportunity for interaction and feedback as well. But if you email me, I'm happy to also share a couple of agendas of what we've done in the past, just so you have an example of that. And then the last thing that I'll say is we also try to have either our vice chancellor or someone from the leadership team, one of our project sponsors for the SEAL team, also come. They don't necessarily have to speak, but just there to sort of legitimize the work that we're doing and really trying to be intentional and make sure that we are propping up engagement to be at the same level of development. I know that that's sort of a historical challenge that the engagement staff have felt over the years. For the last 3 years, we've had an annual dollar goal for our division, and we've had our annual engagement goal. And so really trying to do the best to prop both of them up and give them equal playing time, for lack of a better expression.
Terrific. We have a few more minutes. I had one quick question as you talked about the high volume of advisory boards and your reluctance to own, quote unquote, own them. Is there any consulting work that you provide of saying, hey, do you have a job description? Can we look at it? Is there some a handful of bullet points that you like to include so maybe you can start educating your internal peers a bit more about best practices?
Yes. Yeah, we're willing to do that. And it's varying levels of degrees. It's, and I think boards are another thing. Everyone wants to have a board, and then they realize what that actually means and how much work it takes to execute a board and have that be a good experience for both the volunteers, and then also making sure you're getting from the volunteers what you want from them. And so, I love there to be bylaws or some sort of guiding document about what that looks like. I don't want it to be 100 pages long because no one's going to read it. I want it to be 2 or 3 pages long at most. I want it to be very clearly this is what we want the board to accomplish. This is the expectations of our board members. This is what you can expect from us. And then short and sweet. And then you use that as part of the conversation when you invite people to consider joining that board. I think I personally feel like every board should have a philanthropic requirement. Doesn't necessarily have to be a dollar amount, but there should at least be an annual participation goal. Our graduates to the last decade board, there's an expectation that every board member makes a gift to their fund of choice in the College of Engineering on an annual basis. And so I think that that's another differentiating thing, especially in our major gift side of we're not going to devote major gift officer time to a board if that board, there's no expectation, interest, or appetite for philanthropy, because it's not a good use of our time. And so anyway, I could go off for a while on boards, but those are some high level initial thoughts.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Well, we have just a minute left. I'll start. One, Kevin, thank you so much for your insights, sharing all this wonderful information. For everyone on the webinar, I'm putting here, hopefully in the chat that you all receive, a link to the EDF LinkedIn page. It's a way to stay connected with us besides through the email. And we have this virtual engagement now. We have some other virtual engagement in the spring, but we really are focused on, and this was an in-person conference to talk with our peers in the fundraising space and the alumni relations space around engineering. This year, we are lucky enough to go just down the road from where Kevin's located to Colorado State University, June 16th through the 18th, 2025, at a beautiful campus where we'll be able to learn from our peers, learn from other great institutional leaders about best practices and what they're doing across the industry. So Kevin, thank you again. For everyone who joined. Please continue to stay involved. Consider presenting. Talk to your supervisors and leadership around budget approval to make these travel plans out. It's fantastic, and many teams use it as their annual retreat, since many are in hybrid structures now, to come together and see each other and find value and way to amplify the work at your respective institutions. So with that, Thank you all for your time, and have a wonderful day and a nice spring or fall semester or fall quarter, depending on how you track it. Bye now.